una tutoría de mandatos de nosotros. So nosotros commands in Spanish is how we express let's do something. So we have a few objectives for this lesson. The first one is obviously we're going to learn how to form affirmative and negative nosotros commands. We'll also understand pronoun attachment spelling rules for affirmative commands. There's going to be a couple things that we need to consider whenever we go attaching pronouns to nosotros commands. And we also need to understand that ir is an exception to the rules. So we'll find out finally why Dora says vámonos. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a warm-up, just so you can kind of get an idea of how it's formed. So in Espanol, if we were to say let's sing, we would say cantemos. If we were to say let's begin, we would say comencemos or empecemos. Remember that comenzar and empezar are synonyms, so we could say either one of those. And let's give them the answer. We'll say démosles la respuesta. So you can see an indirect object pronoun being attached to the verb demos, which is let's give. And then let's give it to them. You can see an example of double object pronouns, so démosela. So we will discuss how those are formed in the coming slides. Okay, so first let's start off with affirmative and negative commands. We're going to use the subjunctive of the nosotros as you saw in the previous slide. So if I wanted to say let's celebrate, celebrar, I would simply go to that opposite vowel. Remember, celebremos. Let's eat with comer, then it's going to have an A in it. It would be comamos. Let's party is the verb festejar, so you say to party, and that is festejemos. So here's a negative. A negative is simply very straightforward. We're just going to put a no in front of it. We still use the subjunctive form, and that is no estudiemos, for let's not study. So let's not listen then would be no escuchemos. So there you can see how basic affirmative and negative let's commands or nosotros commands are formed. We simply just use the subjunctive. Okay? So here's a little bit of a reminder. We have to keep in mind that IR stem changing verbs stem change in the nosotros form of the subjunctive. AR verbs and ER verbs do not. They go back to the original vowel. But IR stem changing verbs we have to keep in mind. So if we were to say let's sleep, we have to say durmamos. That O changes to a U. If I were to say let's order something, pidamos. Or let's serve the guests or whatever would be sirvamos. So I wanted to remind you of that because it's been a while since we've used the nosotros form of the subjunctive. So keep those things in mind. All right. Next thing we need to consider is how ir is different and special in nosotros commands. So when ir is an affirmative command, we will use the regular present indicative. It's an exception to the previous rule of always go to the subjunctive. With ir, it's special. So if I wanted to say let's go, I say vamos. Okay? So regular present indicative for ir. If it's negative, though, then it changes forms and goes into the subjunctive. So let's not go would be no vayamos. Okay? Now you still may be wondering, so then why does Dora say vámonos? And that will come up in a few slides. She's actually using the reflexive irse, which is to get going. Okay? So, but if you were just to say let's go, there's two ways to do it. First way, vamos. The second way is the doorway, and I'll show you that in a second, okay? So what you need to take away from this slide is positive command for ir is regular present indicative. It is only used in the subjunctive when it's negative. All right, so let's talk about pronouns. When we talk about pronouns, we're going to have two different slides. First slide is about direct and indirect, and then the second one will be about reflexive. So if you want to organize your notes that way, we will actually have to address it two different ways. So affirmative commands, you must attach the pronouns, no matter what the pronoun is, whether it be direct or indirect or reflexive. So let's watch it. Okay, mirar is the verb for to watch. Let's say it's lo, so miremoslo. Now again, we have to accent where the natural stress would be. So if you covered up the lo, the natural stress would fall on the syllable right before the most because it ends in an S, which means it falls on the second to last syllable. So the natural stress would be miremos. When we add the lo, everything shifts. So we don't want that natural accent to fall on the most part. We don't want to say miremoslo. So therefore we have to put the written accent to keep the stress where it belongs. Miremoslo. So be careful whenever you attach, you will also have to accent. Okay, so affirmative commands you must attach. So no matter what the pronouns are. So here's a double object pronoun one. It says let's tell it to him. So let's see how this works. It would be digamos. That would be the let's tell. Then it would be say and then lo. Okay, so the se would be the to him, the lo would be it. However, the version on the right is the correct one. Spanish doesn't double up on s's ever, so you just would not double up on an s there. Okay, so digámoselo. Okay, again, accent mark where it should be. You would normally say digamos. So then whenever you go to put any attachment, or I'm sorry, any pronouns attached to the end of it, you are going to have to accent mark there. So what you need to take away from that example is that whenever you have mos and then say right after it for a double object pronoun, you get rid of that first or second s. It doesn't matter. You just want s there. So no doubling up on s's. Negatives are going to be easier. They just don't get attached. Once it's negative, you cannot attach anything. So let's not watch it. Then the lo will come off there. No lo miremos. The lo comes off, so does the accent mark, because the natural stress is on the e, and that's where I want it. Let's not tell it to him. Everything will come off of there, and it'll be no se lo digamos. Okay? So affirmatives, you have to attach. Negatives, you cannot. All right? So let's talk about reflexives. All right? So with reflexives, the pronoun will always be nos because we're doing something back to ourselves. So what we're going to have to do, though, is we're going to have to chop off the s before the nos. So what that means is we can't say most nos. Okay? So we don't want to ever say most nos. So if we were to say let's go to bed, the verb acostarse, we would get acostemos, but then we have to make it reflexive because it's a reflexive verb. So we don't want to say acostemos nos. We say acostémonos, so it chops off that s. So we have to be aware of s's whenever we do nosotros commands. So if it's reflexive, you just have to remember you can't say most nos, you have to say monos. So let's hide is the verb esconderse, where we'll hide ourselves. So the opposite vowel will be an a, so we'll say escondámonos. Alright? And what I say is monos means monkeys. So what I always say is just remember with the accent mark for this, accent right before the monkeys. Okay, so acostémonos. So reflexives, you want a monkey in there. You want monos, not monos. So that brings us to why does Dora say, let's go, vámonos? The reason why is she's using ear say. And if you remember from a few slides ago, we don't use ear subjunctive when it's positive. We use the regular indicative. So she's saying vamos, and then she's attaching nos to the end of it. And she knows that she can't say vamos nos. So that's why she chops off that s and says vámonos. Okay, so that's why Dora says, let's go that way. Could she just say vamos? Absolutely. Okay, let's go is vamos, let's get going is vámonos. There's barely a difference in English. Okay, so you have options. You could just say vamos, or you could say vámonos. But that explains why she's not saying vámonos and why there's a reflexive pronoun on there in the first place, because ear say means to get going. Okay, so now I'd like you to pause the video and in your notes, try this out on your own and kind of test your knowledge on how the subjunctive works. So if you pause and do these 6 examples, then when you come back to the video, I will then confirm whether your answers are correct. Okay, so if we were to say, let's buy the book, we would use the verb comprar. So the opposite vowel would be an E, so we should say compremos el libro. Very straightforward subjunctive. Let's go with her. Anytime we see go, we have to put on the brakes and go, uh-oh, this is ear. Is it affirmative or is it negative? It's an affirmative, which means we use the indicative, so that would just be vamos. If we wanted to say let's get going, then it would be reflexive, vámonos. But here we're just saying let's go, vamos. Now we're going to say let's not go with him. That's negative, so you should have put no vayamos. And then let's sit down here is a reflexive. We're using sentarse. Sentarse is going to have an opposite vowel, which is an E, so that'd be sentemos. But once we put the nos on it, we're not going to say sentémonos, or most nos. We're going to say sentémonos. I can't even say it incorrectly, okay? So we don't want to say most nos, okay? So we have monkeys. We attach right before the monkeys, monos. Sentémonos. All right, so let's get up is another example of a reflexive. So that is the verb levantarse. So that would be levantémonos. Okay, accent before the monkeys, no, most nos. But when it's negative, then our attachment cannot happen. We just do no nos levantemos. Still, we have an opposite vowel there. Okay, we will do some more work with the object pronouns. So if we have double object pronouns and we have a say next to them, we'll practice those again. We'll practice those some more in class. So if you're feeling a little shaky there, that's okay. Well, you know that I will provide class time practice for you. So make sure you fill out the Google form to the best of your ability. Y gracias.